so wonderful to see so many people here to support this event, and I just want to thank you on behalf of Jen and Byron and myself. We're just like thrilled to see you all here, and I have a few quick remarks before I'll turn the table over to our esteemed guests. My name is Kelly Blewett, and I'm the Writing Program Director. I think I know everyone in this room. It is such a pleasure to see you all, and I just want to open up by thanking Dean Darren Snyder for supporting this event. And also the Mindful Explorations for their kind support as well. And I am co-sponsoring this event, the writing program, with Yemi Mahoney from the Diversity Committee. Thank you, Yemi. And Rosalie Aldrich from the Communications Department. So we're really, really glad that you're here to kind of welcome Byron and Jen, as well as to celebrate the National Day on Writing. So National Day on Writing happens every fall, and it's a chance for communities to come together and talk about the role that writing plays in our lives. And what you're seeing behind you here on the board is the responses of 120 people in our community about the role that writing has played. I like Mason's response. I mean, it's honest. It is honest. It's honest. I don't know if you saw the tweets that went out yesterday from the IU East marketing folks, but the last tweet of the day said, "I need to thank writing for solving all my problems." So what we focused on this year for the National Day on Writing was using writing to get through difficult times. And this has been a difficult season where we've had to find new ways to kind of dig deep and process what's going on, to stay connected to each other during a time that we can't be together in ways that we've been together in the past, and even to think about some of the losses that we've experienced this year. So we wanted to specifically invite students to think about writing and healing, writing and processing, writing and resilience. And that is really where our guests today, Jennifer Mooney and Byron McCauley, their work in this book that I know many of you have read, Hope Interrupted, is just so on point for the kind of thinking that we are doing together. I like the story of the origin story of this book, that Byron texted Jen shortly after the death of George Floyd and said, "I feel like we're living through history and we need to write it down." And Jen said, "Okay, let's start tomorrow." And she wrote the first letter here in June, and they wrote a letter a day to each other from June through November. And that process of writing to each other helped them think about some big transitions that were afoot for both of them. It helped them come to terms with just what was in the news as they kind of restated it in their own words, but it also helped them connect and support each other. And your relationship is one of the things that is just like so wonderful about this book and so affirming about reading it. And they are optimists and they are advocates for hope. As I thought about introducing them today, I wanted to share a quote from John Lewis, who I know that you both really admire and who shows up in this book. And this was something that he said during the summer that you all were writing shortly before his death in June of 2020. He said, "We must never give up or give in or throw in the towel. We must continue to press on and be prepared to do what we can to help educate people, to help motivate people, to inspire people to stay engaged, to stay involved, and to not lose their sense of hope." And I really believe that's the work that you all undertook in this book, and I think that it has made our community a little bit more hopeful to read your work. So before I turn the tables over to them, I just wanted to share just a tiny bit about Jen and Byron. Jen had an executive role with Time Warner and its predecessors. She has a BA from Albion College and an MBA or an MA from Union Institute and the University of Vermont College. She lives in New Mexico with her husband, and together they have 4 daughters. And Byron is a communications executive, a former award-winning columnist, journalist, and editor with the Cincinnati Enquirer. He is the son of a single mother from Louisiana, and he has worked hard for education, advocacy, and reform. He lives in Cincinnati with 3 daughters, so between the 2 of them, we have 7 daughters. I'm just really glad to also say that his wife Jill is able to be with us today, and it's nice that you're here as well. And we'll turn it over to Jen and Byron.
Wow. I know. Can we just take her?
I would love that. That would be great. I know it would be your loss.
Yeah, sure. You can't take her.
Well, it's really great when we, and tell us if we need to speak up or down or something. It's really, my hearing is bad from too many loud rock concerts when I was young, so sometimes I speak too loudly.
And my hearing is just bad.
But
It'll be fine.
It's great to, when we meet someone who understands the work and what we were trying to do.
Right, it is. And this is also our first time being in front of a live studio audience, so we're really excited about this. COVID, as you guys know, has really done a doozy on us from a standpoint of just kind of living and interacting with one another. So it is such a pleasure. This day has been really wonderful. I am so energized, and we have been looking so forward to seeing you guys today, and I thank you for the turnout. So I'll say that before we get started.
We've been doing a lot of virtual. We were on C-SPAN Book TV.
Yes.
And that was just one of those cool things. And
yeah.
We've been interacting with a lot of audiences virtually, but it is really nice and gives us some energy to see real people.
No doubt.
Yeah.
So I know we're going to talk about healing through writing.
Right.
Today, and it is true that when George Floyd died, I was completely moved, as most of us were, to see pretty much a public lynching on in front of our eyes.
Yeah.
And that combined with political unrest and this COVID, which is still pretty relentless. We're all in masks here. We had to just get that history down and just say, what's going on here? How can we put it in perspective? But how can we also stay hopeful? And Jennifer, you've really been able to encapsulate that in the way you're talking about, things happening and things that have happened in the past, and yet here we sit, here we are, here we stand,
When we started to write, Byron and I have been friends for a long time. Now we are I always say hashtag brother from another mother.
Yeah, she does.
We do.
And I love it when she does. I actually retweet that too.
It alliterates better than sister from another mother.
Mother. Or sister from another mister.
That would work, but I think our parents, we still have one living parent between us.
Yeah, and it definitely is not sister from another mister. What a regal woman.
And we were asked to kind of start out, what we're going to do today is kind of talk a little about our process, why we decided to write, and then we're going to do some reading. And if our time, Kelly gets, I'm trying to, but let me know how we're doing on time. Byron, as Kelly said, Byron and I I'm from Cincinnati, that's where we knew each other. And then my husband and I had been living in 2 places, and we decided to relocate to New Mexico. And Byron and I were those kinds of friends who would ask each other anything. We'd sit down at meals and we'd talk about race. We just talked, there was almost no subject we didn't talk about.
Yes.
And then
he not benefited from that too.
Well, I did, we just had these open, we just had this level of trust, very open relationship. And once we decided to write, and we did write through November, and then our publisher asked us to come back and do an epilogue, which we did basically right after the inauguration. And those of you who've read it or are reading, you may or may not know that. And the class we just taught kind of asked us to explain our process. We were writing every other day. I had a tendency to like to write in the morning. I'd wake up, stay in bed with my laptop and write, and the days I wasn't writing, what I found is I became much more observant about just everything going on around me. People and what they were saying, and I was moving around some, the moods in different parts of the country.
Yeah, I remember you were in Kansas and you were
We were driving the car a lot back and forth across the
and
country.
It was just amazing when you say who were masked and who were not.
Yeah, I mean, we were
Like,
just,
that was really kind of interesting to me.
and we were kind of observing all that, and so I'd take notes, and then I'd write, and I'd send it to Byron, and
Yeah.
then,
Usually I get what she wrote at about noon, and then I sort of have to finish my work day, and then at night I would start writing. I'd be thinking about what she said and thinking about the day and thinking about what I wanted to communicate based on all the things that were happening in our world, our place in it. So usually I was writing, and Jill can attest, there was always a dim, kind of bright to her computer light on by the bed, and I was writing, but I would usually finish it up, and you'd probably get it about, late-ish.
I mean, I'd see it in the morning,
Right.
and
And then but the thing about it was, it kept me going. It was like you knew you had to get up and go to work because your staff is depending on you to be there to set the tone. Well, she was depending on me to write, and I was depending on her to write, and that's really what kept us going. And we got to this point where, man, we really thought we kind of have ourselves something here, because I grew to depend on it. To me, it was healing, it was therapeutic, and it really is something that I even miss today, the cadence of it. So I just think that was really helpful.
well, and we're probably gonna go back, we've been playing with some other things, we'll
Yeah.
probably go back in. Kelly also asked us to talk about how we pick the topics. I mean, I think the topics pick themselves.
Yeah, they did.
It
They
wasn't,
did.
it was driven, I've always kind of wanted to write some fiction. I honestly don't know if I can. I mean, what I know is that, and we both come out of backgrounds where we were dealing with news cycles, and I mean, I spent all these years in PR and dealing with government relations and all those things, so I'm not sure. I mean, that was kind of, we had that, and unfortunately, it was really an impactful time. Right now, I have trouble with, when I'm seeing things going on, I think, wow, we need to start,
Yeah.
you see things going on. And
Right.
do you want to address that, and then,
Just how we picked our topics?
yeah,
Oh, they did pick themselves, but I found myself delving into things that I hadn't delved in for a long time. Like, the therapy that I was getting from writing was allowing me to tell some truths that I hadn't told, really even to myself. Some of these things just started to come out, and I had to tell her. And it all had to do with, our sort of current condition. I think also because we were all home for all that time, you start to think, what does my life really mean? And I think that's what drove a lot of.
or how am I spending my
How am I
time?
spending my time? That is it.
Yeah,
How am I spending my time? And am I doing what I need to be doing to pour into someone else to help them move to where they need to be or want to be? Like, where's my role in that as well?
and we both were going through, and those of you who read know this, I think the hardest thing for the awakenings of last year, and we do have these 7 daughters between us, are, boy, we've really messed this world. Our generations have messed this world up for our kids. And we, at the same time, trying to be optimistic about a future where our kids, and where they get to live, and that they're the future, and we've left. And I have one daughter who likes to remind me about how messed up the baby boomer generation, which I'm in and you're not, because I'm a little older.
That's right. I didn't make it there.
Byron's 2 years younger than me.
So,
You asked
good.
also how readers have responded. Dealing with the readers, aside from writing the book, and writing the book was fun. Dealing with the publishing process, not so fun.
No, not too far.
Terrible, I think. I don't like it at all. But
Absolutely is not
the
great.
readers are great, and I love it when we hear from readers, and people have been pouring out their life stories to us. And a lot of people, we had one editor tell us that, oh, do you really think you're going to start a movement where people start getting to know each other and write letters? That's never going to happen.
And
But
then he said, if you guys get a divorce and marry each
she
other,
said
maybe that'd be
you
interesting.
need more action. We were on a Zoom call or something, and Byron
Yeah.
texted me the head exploding emoji, like this is nuts. But
Right, that wasn't it.
But we have found a lot of readers saying that this made them feel brave, that they
Yeah.
could do things and talk to people and cross the street for someone who might be different. And
Yes.
that's, we didn't expect this to happen exponentially, but we know that it's happening by the things we're hearing from
That's
people.
right. Reaching out to someone who is not necessarily like you,
Right.
or even like your neighbor that you don't know.
And it's amazing in this world how few people really are willing to get to know people who are like them. And for us, I mean, if you've read the book, our politics are pretty obvious in here, and we're careful. My guess is in this group, we're probably pretty safe, but we're kind of careful to not club anyone with that, because we know some people can find our
Right.
rants a little annoying.
Right, and of course, yeah, they can be, I won't say. Yeah, just, my politics haven't always been like they are now, but they are what they are right now, so it's definitely the truth.
We both wanted to change at the top. I mean, that's
Yes.
fair to say.
Yes, we did.
So do we want to dive into the first reading? The first
Yeah, why
section?
don't we?
Do you want to do that right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, let's see, I'm gonna open up.
Do you want to, first reading,
yeah.
remember yours was
First
doing
Um,
letter one, and then
Letter
you're
one.
doing letter two.
You're doing one, okay.
Yeah.
Because I was gonna say, I almost felt like the pastor, open your Bibles up.
If you want to do another one first, you can. Whatever you want to do. This one's a little more sequential than some of what we were doing with the classes.
Yes.
So what page?
We're gonna do page 3. Is that right?
Page 3, Bearing a
Bearing a
Friend.
friend, yes.
So this is how the book opens. And this is called Bearing a Friend. This is the first entry. This is June 6th. It's shortly after George Floyd has been murdered, and I'm writing from Taos, New Mexico. We are not reading full letters because we don't want to keep you here all night, but this was what I first wrote to Byron. So get this, I was called a Nazi today in the grocery store. We went to the farmer's market first, all good. Everyone was in masks and peaceful. Going to the big store always feels risky, even though masks are required by law here. We were in the checkout line. I looked over and saw a woman gesturing in the face of a store employee. She was not wearing a mask, the only person whom I've observed in a crowded store without one. She was about my age, hippie wear, and looked like a peace-loving type. He was a tall, young black man monitoring people at the self-checkout. I noticed that she was yelling and finger-pointing. I approached and said, "Please move back. You do not have a mask on and are less than 6 feet away from him." She yelled at me and said, "You are the problem. You believe the hoax and you're being violent." He looked at me and said thanks and stared straight ahead. I went back to my lane. Don, that's my husband, looked as if he thought that I might get into a fist fight. Never been in one. I kept track of her. I noticed she was in his face again, yelling at the self-serve checkout. Again I approached and she yelled, "You are a Nazi," and I yelled back, "No, I'm a Jew." Our checker said that lady always causes problems and never wears a mask. That's my first being called a Nazi.
Yeah. Can you imagine when I got that letter? Well, the first day she came out smoking. Okay. So the next, and really, Jennifer had asked me if she was a Karen, and I was like, nah, you're not a Karen.
Yeah, in that letter, I kind of explored whether I was a Karen and what a Karen
Right,
was and all
right.
those things, yeah.
Right, and so my first sentence in this is, no, you're not one of those annoying white people. She asked me if I was one of those annoying white people. I said, no, you're not. But I'm going to start out. This letter was Sunday, June 7th, 2020, and I was writing from Cincinnati. And I'm going to read a couple of sections of this, and you'll see why. Jennifer, I hardly watched any news today. Yay me, because I'm trying to, news is news. But I was riding in the car, and I had Sirius XM radio on CNN, and I heard General Colin Powell say he would not be voting for Trump in 2020. He didn't support him in 2016 either. And just now I saw where Senator Mitt Romney, never a friend of Trump, is not supporting him in his run for president. I have always liked Colin Powell. I was enamored with his role in government in the 1980s and 90s because he was one of the few African-American Republicans who could provide an example for those of us who fancied ourselves as conservatives as well. And then I'm going to skip down because we just lost a great man, Colin Powell. So I'm going to skip down a couple paragraphs, still on page 5. I feel like we are embarking on significant social change, the kind that I have not seen in my lifetime, even when Americans elected President Obama in 2008. So let me tell you about today. We canceled church services at our church, Compass Community Church in Sharonville, and we partnered with the Red Door Church in Forest Park to walk to honor George Floyd and other African Americans who have died at the hands of police. Our church is fully integrated, peppered with blended and mixed-race families. I would say inclusion is one of our core values. Our pastor is Bahamian. Most worshipers at the Red Door Church would probably self-identify as white. And when we got together and walked 4.8 miles from our church to theirs, it was quite a sight. It was hot, and many people could not make the entire route. But here we were in suburban Cincinnati with our little protest with a large dose of unity.
Do we want to discuss those entries at all, do you think?
I do. There is some context, I think, that we could provide.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. So you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I started out of the gate with the Nazi piece.
Yeah.
And
You also had some Nazi art in the book too.
yes,
it wasn't
my daughter lives in Berlin, so there were some themes going on.
And I didn't know that was the symbol, which is interesting, I thought.
Yeah, my daughter lives in Berlin, and she's in the book quite a bit because she ends up getting married in Europe without, in a civil ceremony, without any family there, in the middle of COVID, and that's one of those things that, in terms of hardship, it's probably a first world problem to not be at your daughter's wedding, but it still was. I mean, it was a little rough. I think once I started thinking this way, that we were writing to each other, I still would have observed the woman and done what I did, but I all of a sudden was observing a whole lot more about human behavior.
Right, isn't that something?
Yeah.
Because I did too, and we didn't acknowledge that we were writing a book. I mean, at some point.
After about 60 days we did.
You knew that,
Yeah.
this is a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was doing the same thing. The context, are you finished with that?
No, keep going.
So the context behind my letter here is that, so Sharonville, if you're familiar with Cincinnati at all, it's a suburban, first ring suburb around Cincinnati. And that's where our church is. And the police force around there are two cities that our church is kind of splits the middle of two municipalities. And the police, they came and they came to our church, and we're forming this wonderful relationship with them. And of course, you've got George Floyd having been killed a few days earlier. And then you've got these wonderful police joining us. It was really kind of their way of saying, hey, we know you guys are hurting, but we want to make it okay, or help make it okay, and show you something else. And maybe 3 weeks earlier, Jill was driving down the Interstate 275, which is the ring around the city, and she saw no fewer than 30 police cars that had blocked the interstate. No fewer, and I'm serious. So imagine what this looks like, right? This is definitely lights like, you know, Santa's reindeer with blue. Well, that's not really a good analogy. But anyway, we knew something had gone on. We later found out a police officer had been killed. And it was their police officer. And she was African American, the only African American woman in that police force. So they were hurting, and they were hurting really badly because they had promised for this young lady. But they talked about that, right? They told us about that in the walk. And so that was kind of interesting, all those dynamics going on.
We talk a lot in the book about our parents.
Yes.
Truth be told, we had to kind of go back in and sanitize this a number of times.
Yes.
I mean, we did. I mean,
One of our parents is still living, by the way.
Yeah, she is, and we were mindful of not putting our family members into awkward positions. Having said that, we did talk, and we both come from broken homes. I'm not sure who doesn't these days, but we started to explore that. And this one is called, that I wrote, is called Broken Parents. It's Monday, June 22nd, 2020, from Taos, New Mexico.
And it's page 40, right?
Exactly. And I say hi and good morning, and obviously we're skipping around. It's true that all families have challenges and ours are minor. This is all accurate. However, the very real sense of abandonment and intense personal insecurity is something that has impacted me across time and circumstance. Don says I'm easy to live with, yet I know that the reassurance that I often need can be troubling. For both of us, living without a father and trying to forget or not bother is something that is tied to our tails, as they say in psychological sessions. It creates a sense of our not being worthy of love, since a parent chose to abandon us. It's also had a long-term cumulative effect with our relationship with the remaining parent, and we both know that our mothers did what they thought was best. Being abandoned by a dad who was also an alcoholic leads to all those complicated challenges like insecurity and not ever being enough, and then sometimes far too much. And I can't imagine how tough this was for my father, as broken as he was. To this day, I'm sad for him. It's taken years, but what I feel mostly is sadness and guilt. And we're dealing with Father's Day coming at this point.
Yeah, that was really, that was heavy for me when you wrote this one, Jennifer, because it was also close. And so it set off, I think we probably had both written a little bit about our dads earlier, because I see on this letter, I say, yeah, this may be the final, anyway, I'll tell them. But anyway, it was moving. That was very moving. So I wrote the very next day, and it was, this would be Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020, and I was writing from Cincinnati. So the title of this sort of is not really what it's about, except that our house in Louisiana was just a few yards from the Louisiana Pacific Railway, and my father-in-law would tell me later that he knew exactly where I lived because I used to drive the train right by our house every other day. But the title of this is the train engineer, my father-in-law. But it actually talks about fatherhood again. So, dear Jen, this may not be the final father-oriented letter, but I personally want to get off this subject for a while after I write this. This is to say, I do not mind if you write more on the subject. Truth is, I don't know any child whose life was idyllic. All seem to have some kind of weird thing with their parents. This is true. This is true with children of means or the poorest of the poor, anywhere in the world. I feel as if I got a quadruple dose. I lived with my grandmother until I was 6 years old, along with my mom and her 6 siblings, ages 10 to 18. One sibling, her older brother, had moved out and started his own family. Mom's younger brother, Raymond, was fighting in that unpopular war in steamy Far East jungles. My earliest childhood memory was me convulsing in tears on my grandmother's vinyl pastel flower pattern couch. You guys remember that couch? Mom was leaving to live with Buddy. They were already married. I had no idea. And she was giving me the choice of who I wanted to live with, her or Mama. Mama was her mother and my grandmother, but Mama felt like my mother. Stay with me, guys. Mama felt like my mother, and my own mother was more like an aunt. I did not go the first night, nor the second. When I did go, my world opened up, but slowly. I had my own room, I had my own things for the first time. Eventually I got used to it and embraced life as an only child. There was one thing I could never get used to. A freight train ran in front of our house twice each night. Every time it rumbled over the tracks, it literally felt like the world was coming to an end. I'll stop there.
So let's talk about these for a few minutes. I mean, what Byron and I learned, and we knew each other pretty well, but the way we turned out as adults and the issues that we have still are very much a result of the kind of parenting we had, essentially being raised by single mothers. And even though he was a black man in the Deep South, and I was a Jewish woman in the North in Wyoming, Ohio. Some of you live there and some of you know the place.
Right.
The impact it had on us was pretty much about the same.
It did, yeah. I think I'm thankful for where I grew up actually, because it did make, me very resilient and gritty. But it also does a lot of the things that we talk about. You get those, a little bit of anxiety, and you're uncertain about your own way. Matter of fact, I was talking to somebody the other day, and I said, they asked me, did you want children when you were younger? And I told them, yeah, I did want children. And Jill and I ended up having, 3 children. We've been pregnant for she's been pregnant, let me just say this. We lost some children along the way, and that's very common as well. But I told them I didn't want sons because I didn't think I would be able to raise them well. I didn't know how to raise them well. That's something.
What's funny is, and I wrote about this, we're not reading about it today, is I am in a heavy dominated female family, which my grandmother said the men really aren't members of the family, except to the extent that they were necessary to have more girls.
Oh my God.
But I was afraid to try to raise a boy too.
Really?
Yeah, I was. I didn't know what I didn't have instruction on that. No.
First of all, they don't come with instructions. None of them, but still.
No.
None of them do, but then to have something that you didn't think you could relate to, which was interesting because
Yeah, and we do.
We had our 3 girls. We
do write about, when we wrote this book too, when we were finished, I said to Byron, I think this is more of a women's book.
Yeah.
I think it's a women's 50-something book. But what we have found men have really connected with it.
Yeah.
But I was convinced that it was maybe a little too emotional.
Yeah,
Yeah, but a lot of men, I mean, you have a number of men in your life.
Yes.
People who, you show up for a big cigar smoke and bourbon or whatever you
Yeah.
guys do, and
That's what we did.
they're
yes,
all reading the book.
and they bought the book, before a bonfire. And all right, that was good. And then a 22-year-old young man read it overnight, came back and said, "Hey, this is so great."
Or I've had men come up to me almost choked up about some things in the book, and that's, wow, I mean, that's been impactful.
That's big.
So we're going to, the third reading I'm going to do is called In Thin Air. It's Tuesday, July 14, 2020, in a small town, Twin Lakes, Colorado, which is literally in the middle of nowhere, but I'd highly recommend going there. And this is more on parenting. Dear Byron, we continue to be in an undisclosed location, a remote cabin, Twin Lakes, in Old Mining West town in Colorado. Our plan in coming here was to avoid the constant phone, email, text, and many client demands. Well, we're grateful. It's been way too long since we unplugged. However, as responsible grown-ups, we've continued to stay plugged in. I'm thankful for the ability to find a slow connection. Latest news. Our daughter Caroline, who lives on the South Carolina-Georgia line, was just notified by our landlord. The couple living next door with whom she shares a driveway, both doctors have COVID. Our otherwise healthy girl is her mama now worried. She's down there alone, which concerns me, like how will my baby be taken care of if she becomes ill? And she's living in a pretty open part of the nation. For the last 3 hours, I've not been manic. I don't do manic anymore. I'm worried though. I'm wondering who'll take Caroline if she gets sick. Would I fly in and care for her? She gets sick, I get sick. And I've gone from 0 to 60 minutes really in an hour. But I'm a mom and a contingency planner. What to do? Nothing. That's the worst part of this. Families apart and doing nothing.
I felt the desperation in that. I was having it too. You talk about Caroline a lot. I mean, there's deep love and affection for her. I feel like, okay, I do have a favorite child. I do have one. But all of them think they're the favorite child. So.
That's the important part.
Right. So I'm going to read, where am I reading?
You're reading on 92.
Okay.
You're on a beacon of light.
Yeah. Yes, a beacon of light, July 15th, 2020. Let me see, where was I gonna start? I was going to start, so I talked a lot in this when, I talked about being at 55 in my brain. Okay, I'll just start. I've learned that at 55, my brain does not want to respond to the problems and stressors of a 35-year-old. I get hot, break out into a sweat, become irritable if I feel overwhelmed. And lately, my days of feeling overwhelmed have arrived like avalanches. And then I talked about one of the worst days in the newspaper industry I had, which was like a 16-hour day that would never end because everything sort of messed up.
Byron is pretty straight up about what working in the newspaper industry was like. I mean, you're pretty direct about it.
Yeah. So do you guys know the classic book Animal Farm? Anyway, it was tough. It was very rewarding. Very rewarding. Yes. But here's one of the things that was an unexpected gift that I talked about on the bright side for this particular opening. I said on the bright side, this initiative branded Room at the Table first was marketed by the Cincinnati Regional Chamber, and the person who developed it is a Stanford-trained HR executive and mental health counselor. The chamber is no longer housing it, so the creator has asked some of us who have gone through the exercises to lead. I was one of these leaders. When we finished our first session, We just finished our first session, which was an unexpected gift. I remember writing this after that session. This is one of the few ones that I wrote before midnight. Some takeaways. I remain startled at the depth of racism in America. Some of the participants discussed being spanked as early as age 4 for playing with a black child, which ignited a fear of black people well into adulthood. A person of color in the group with a white stepmom attended a local university known for Greek mischief. Her first exposure was overt racism was Ghetto Week, where suburban kids found it funny to wear gold chains, afro wigs, and boomboxes. And a person raised in one of our suburbs never encountered a black person until she joined the workforce. I could go on, but the good news is they're all in my group voluntarily because they want a future that is better than our past, to which I say, amen.
So Byron, we spent a lot of time writing about things that were stressing us out.
Yes, we did. But we also spent some time not writing anything much.
And some of this book is funny. We're not necessarily reading the funny parts.
Yeah.
Kelly, how are we? 15 more minutes?
Yes, but I will tell you, this is a crowd that will have some questions.
Okay.
So we might want to reserve
Why
some
don't we
time for
just
that,
stop?
Well, do you
Why
want
don't
us
we
to stop or keep reading? What do you want?
Because you've read a lot of this probably, some of you, right?
I do think there are people here who have read it. Are there some questions in the audience that, I see some people nodding, maybe finishing your thought and then transitioning to questions, Mike?
Sure.
Okay.
So you were talking about, we did write some happy moments.
We did. I mean, we both have a sense of humor.
Yeah, we do.
And
Well, we like to think we do.
we like, I mean, we tried to be light too. I think we tried every day to, there weren't many letters that were just total downers. There's some
No.
light,
Yeah,
and levity in each of them.
yes. Like the beer and the Dr. Pepper and the honey bun in my uncle's grave.
Right,
That was one.
yeah.
I saw that. Did you guys remember that? Did you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that happened. And then the vegetables.
You seem to have a lot of humor around food.
I did have some the vegetables, but the zucchini and all that stuff. Pepper.
So we could go on, but everyone here reads, so, or has a sense of it.
Yeah.
And we're at the point where we're figuring out kind of where to go next on our writing together and how to do that.
Yeah. We don't really know what we're gonna attack next, but I think it'll be something similar. Maybe it's a chapter interspersed, full chapters about, we don't know, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we don't know. I mean, we've been playing with some ideas. As you all know, you don't write a book to, I think we're both working writers, but you don't write a book as a way to just totally earn a living. It's really rough, so it's something we do in addition to other things. But if you decide you want to spend a lot of time writing, you really don't want to do anything else. My whole life, I mean, I was a corporate executive for a long time, but I always just wanted to write. However, when you're paying college tuitions and all that, you do some other things. You do some other things as well. And I think we both have found, we talked about it in the car today, one of the big problems is when you're doing a lot of writing, for me, business writing or client writing, you get limited on how much juice you have then to put into your own work. It's not infinite. You get pretty tired.
And I was producing a column every 2.5 days. So that was, that competed with a lot that's going on.
You start to resent some of this writing you're forced to do.
Right.
But the writing that pays the,
you want to do.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about anything you guys want.
Right there.
I want to thank you so much for your book. I haven't quite finished it, but it was amazing to read because I think so many of us have that collective experience from 2020. You know, with COVID hitting, and then the Black Lives Matter movement and crazy politics, and it's just, you know, it will be a year for the books, and you really encapsulated that so well. And I just wanted to add on our local story. Richmond, Indiana had 3 Black Lives Matter marches throughout the summer. I attended one in June. The one on Labor Day, we were out of town, and some of you who live here know, there was a driver in a car who decided he didn't want to stop for the marchers going across the street and just rammed right through them. And several people were trying to stop him and get people out of the way. And wouldn't you know, those 4 people got arrested. And it all came out that they technically didn't have the license to march. And Indiana does not have a right-of-way, pedestrian right-of-way law on the books. So apparently they didn't have the right to walk across the street, even though it was a mass movement, you know, for a very good cause. So anyway, that's kind of been what's happened in Richmond, and it really shook up so many people because, you know, clearly the driver was in the wrong, and, you know, anyway. So I think your thoughts about everything that was happening resonated with so many people, and I love the letter format, and I hope that the letter is not dead, as your publisher said. I guess to ask a question, I wondered if these were clearly emails, but then your publisher kind of put them in like a paper letter format, and I just wondered if you could say more about the dissemination of writing choices, how you chose to write to each other, and then how it was formatted in the book and presented, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, we were sending emails.
Yeah.
And a lot of times during that, it wasn't just this, but there were texts during the day or phone calls kind of about it.
Right.
The publisher chose to lay this out, because I guess it's gimmicky or something, looking like real letters. Mm-hmm. The letters we actually wrote in emails looked like regular letters. They just were going by email instead of snail mail.
Right.
Yeah.
There's all the salutation and all that.
That's all real.
Sure.
Yeah, because sometimes we said, you know, we had different salutations and had different closings. Yeah.
But we did actually write it like we were writing a letter, just as an attachment to an email.
And you asked why we chose to write what we wrote. We just actually talked about that. Again, it had a lot to do with what was going on in the world and our place in it. But it also, as we got deeper and deeper writing to each other, I think the letters became a little bit more layered and complex.
It gets, I think, my personal opinion is the best part of the book is the last 20%. Because we were more in a groove. I mean, you just start to pick up. Now, having said that, when we were publishing it, I'm thinking, well, we can't just publish the last 20%, or we can't just start at this last 20% and go forward, because we felt like there was a certain time frame we were on. We weren't going to write forever, but where we needed to stop, and we had kind of picked this. We had picked this time period to stop before we knew who the president was. As it turns out, we could have gone on a few extra days.
Oh my gosh, that's true.
But it's funny though how just things happen. Then the publisher said, we'd like you to do an epilogue.
Right.
And who would have thought that there would have been everything that happened on January 6th? So, you know, it's just, I mean, it was just, I mean, that's why some of it wrote itself, because it was so bizarre.
Yeah.
It was. And you go right ahead. I won't say anything.
I was going to ask a question. So I teach creative nonfiction, and some of the things that we discuss with students is ethics and telling of secrets and writing about family. And you touched on part of it with the sanitizing discussion. So, but y'all told some secrets in the book.
Yeah.
So how did you make those decisions about what was going to be okay and what you needed to pull?
I'll go first.
Go, yeah. And tell them about Aunt Dolores.
Oh, yes, tell us about Aunt Dolores.
Well, because
What about-
you were worried she was gonna be mad, then she bought all those books.
Oh, yeah. So I have two aunts. I actually have more than that. You know the sister from?
Yeah.
I have two aunts though, Doris and Deborah.
Yeah.
And they grew up as siblings. And they were really close to my mother. Obviously, they were close. And I thought that they would be disturbed by my revelation. And they were very comforting. You know, my aunt wrote a great Amazon review, and she wrote me a personal email, something to the effect of, you know, you are loved, and it doesn't matter where you come from, you know, but we love you, and you're part of the family, or something like that. It was really interesting.
You were really worried though that she was gonna be upset about
I was.
your birth mother and some
Yeah.
of those things.
Yeah, I was, because, you know, I just found out that, you know, there were some things that, you know, I left home and I wasn't around a ton, and they sort of stepped in a lot, and I was made to actually feel sort of guilt around that, by Aunt Doris. Yeah.
I think what I did, there were a couple things. One, I am married to an attorney, and
Don did help us.
he did help. He did help in terms of, I mean, we obviously didn't want to, there were two things. We didn't want to put anything in that we could get sued over. But then we also wanted to make sure we weren't hurting anyone's feelings or family relationships. On the family, I was a lot more strident on some of the family relationships, and then I pulled back. I decided that people would think it was juicy, but not necessary.
Right. No, eager to it.
And with the kids, we were both really careful. I mean, our kids range in ages, how old's your youngest right now?
My youngest is 13.
13 to my oldest stepdaughter is 43. So I felt like anything, I wasn't going to say anything that was their life story to tell, that wasn't mine. So I was careful about that. And with other people, we generally built composite characters because my husband instructed me, he said, look, if it's your opinion, you can't really be sued over that, but I didn't want to get into any ethical issues.
Right.
So,
People do recognize themselves in the book, I'm sure.
oh yeah, they do.
Yeah.
They do, and I mean, I've had people come up to me and say, oh, is that so-and-so, or, you know, but we're not really disclosing any of that. It doesn't really matter. We used other people when it was something that was really kind of important to the overall story, but not just gratuitously.
Kind of like Joe Friday, the names have been changed.
I don't know, and you're the professor, so you'd tell us more if what we did was right, but
Well, only you will know that.
I feel okay by how we've handled it.
I do too. I was surprised though. I was pleased when you talked about your dad, but I was surprised. That was good. Really good. Yes.
So I think you both bring up really interesting points about masculinity and fatherhood, and the absence of fathers. But I think there's something more to that too. I mean, my husband we have 2 girls, and I think fathers today are very different than fathers from the last generation. You know, I don't know, frankly, that my dad changed very many diapers. You know, but today, I think fatherhood is very different, and I think men are navigating that whole thing in a way without having guidance from the past. And I'm wondering, with all the kind of things happening right now, how much of what we're seeing in politics, this hyper-aggressive, uncompromising male, is kind of this reckoning of masculinity in our culture.
It is, that's kind of a deep psychological question, but it's really, or statement, it's really interesting. I mean, fathers are,
Jennifer's also a psychologist, so she probably can get a bit deeper into that.
but not that kind. I do think that, I have a tendency to think, I look at the son-in-laws that I have, and they're much more, and my husband is, I'm 58 and he's gonna be 71. He was a very evolved man, activist man of the 60s who kind of, does dishes, always has, cooks.
He was in Chicago Democratic Convention.
In
wasn't he?
68.
Yes.
Yeah, and he was part of he was at Notre Dame, part of making them let women in the next year after he graduated. But, and Jill McCauley's here. Byron is, I'm sure Byron was changing diapers.
I was, honey, wasn't I changing diapers? Yes, I was. But I will tell you that Jill tells me a lot that if you had boys, I think you would want to play with them more than you play with your girls. And that gets me every time. I'm just down on my knees. But it's true. It is true. Because girls are girls and boys are boys, and men going to play with their football with their boys and baseball. They're not going to play baseball with their daughters necessarily, and they should. The daughter wants to play baseball. But I will say I am very evolved in trying to be less of that toxic masculinity. I do believe that is definitely something. I think I have been it a little bit. Maybe Jill would clarify. I think I probably have a little, but I'm getting past it because our daughters, and we don't talk about this in the book at all, and it's their thing, but our daughters happen to be, is it okay to say this? They're kind of, I would say, gender fluid, for lack of, that's what I know of right now. And I'm adjusting, we're both adjusting to parenting, people who are sort of on the spectrum of gender and sexuality. So that is another, change in what we have going on. But I do, man, you sound doozy. That was.
You and I, the gender fluid situation in your house. Things like that. We just chose that's not going. That's not going in the book. That's our daughter's business. And you put something out there into the world like this, and it stays out there forever. And these are young people.
Right.
And their story to tell, as you said.
Right.
Exactly.
Their story to tell. And it's okay. It's no secret. It's not a secret. But it is something that, it's reality for our family. And that's that. It's nothing. It's not definitely nothing to be ashamed of or alarmed by or anything like that. We love our children as they are, whatever they choose to be. So.
Thank you both for coming here and for your book. I wanted to ask about journalism as well as writing.
Sure.
That Byron, you're definitely a real writer. That was you're a real writer. And fairly early in the book, it started disheartening me somewhat when it became clear you were looking for another job.
Yes.
You were looking to leave
Yes.
journalism.
Yes.
And I think I was disheartened, especially since I get so frustrated when big lies are being disseminated by purported journalists and the media and so on. So I thought, well, we need journalists the way you were. And Kelly shared a column that you had written that was, online and so on. And then you did find a job that was to your liking, and that's good. And I sensed a little bit why you wanted to leave, and I got angry with the incident of somebody inserting a mistake in your column and publishing it as if you had made the mistake.
Yes.
That made me angry,
Yes.
as well as
And there was no, yes.
you know, readers who had made snarky comments at what you were publishing and so on.
Well, that comes with the territory.
Okay, but with the transition to another job, how are you getting the word out? And maybe you and Jen started sharing future writings, but how do you want to accomplish what you did accomplish as a journalist with your current work, maybe with your current life, away from journalism, which can do a lot of good?
Right, thank you. What a great question. I think that what it would have to be first of all, wonderful question. To answer the first question, I will be writing op-eds from time to time.
Oh, good.
Eventually. I will be submitting, pieces to longer form pieces to publications. And I think it also has to come in another one of these. Maybe it's, us together. Maybe we both break and write our own and then come back together. I don't know, but that's how I think I'm gonna have to get what I want to say about stuff out there. I was frankly, I talked about leaving management, not leaving jobs, I think in that book, in this book, and it's true. There does not exist a perfect situation in journalism. You have to make it what it is, and you have to. So what I did when I was with the column, I just focused on trying to write the best column every day that I could and represent the people that I was writing about, that were basically muses for how I wanted to communicate something. And I just tried to be the best at that every day that I could and not really get caught up into the politics of it all. But sometimes you just have to be done, and that's what I was at the time.
Byron is an exceptional writer, and his leaving the ability to write those columns is a huge loss.
Thank you.
Well, I know that we're just about at time for the event, and I also want to just be mindful that I know some people might have books that they would like to have signed.
So I just want to take a moment to just say thank you so much to Jen and Byron for coming.
So maybe we can just let Jen and Byron stay up front, and if we want to kind of go up and take a book up, or just connect personally, we can do that now. And thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you.